Coming up, a look back to our election night coverage with FNX, including tribal, state, and national elections, the conservative vote in Oklahoma, and what makes Alaska special. I'm Mackenzie Allen Charmley. Join us for those interviews and much, much more from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona is home to 22 tribal nations and more than 340,000 Native Americans. Arizona State University builds on more than 6 decades of working and partnering with tribal nations and communities. Many of our Native faculty incorporate Indigenous knowledge systems in seeking solutions through a process of community engagement that respects and honors traditional ways of thinking. Together, we are creating community solutions leading to a more equitable future.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aliyah Chavez.
Chinangale, we're so glad you could join us. We start in New York, where a veto on a state grave and burial protection law has caused local uproar. Indigenous tribes have condemned New York Governor Kathy Hochul in her decision to veto a bill that would protect unmarked burials of Native American ancestors from unintentional excavation. On December 30th, Hochul vetoed the Unmarked Burial Site Protection Act, which passed both state houses last year with near unanimous support. The bill would have required developers to stop construction after discovering a burial ground and report their findings. According to her veto memo, Hochul claims the bill fails to balance the rights of property owners with the interests of the families of lineal descendants and other groups. The Shinnecock Graves Protection Warrior Society and Honor Our Indigenous Ancestors released a joint statement condemning Hochul's veto and calling it a slap in the face. New York, New Jersey, and Wyoming are the only states in the country that do not have laws protecting Indigenous graves. Moving to Wyoming, new data shows disproportionate rates of incarceration of Native Americans. In 2021, of the 168 people sentenced to prison in Fremont County, 41% were Native American, according to statistics from the Wyoming Department of Corrections. Going back at least a decade, that trend continues at a disproportional rate ranging between 34% and 43%. According to prosecutors in the county, the reason has to do with poverty. The demographics for Native Americans in Fremont County display a correlation of high crime rates with higher poverty rates. In Ottawa, Canada, a program is helping to train the next generation of Indigenous entrepreneurs. ABTN's Annette Francis has more on the Indigenous Makers Masterclass project.
You did say it was intense, but in a good way.
Sherry, Mariah, Tracy, and Cole are 4 of 15 participants in the Indigenous Makers Masterclass project. Over the past 2 months, they've been meeting every day online.
It definitely helped to provide structure and a foundation for successful entrepreneurship and all the fundamentals that we need to launch and scale and grow our brand.
The skills and advice from professional Indigenous mentors helped artist Sherry Rogers to build her confidence and launch her Just Add Feathers business.
I am ready. I'm ready to take my brand to the next level. I've been waiting for something like this, and this is it.
The program has helped Cole Poplinski to focus and find direction for Rustling Pines. Currently, Poplinski is offering workshops on LGBTQ issues and teaching beadwork to people of all gender expressions.
I think there's going to be a lot of change coming up for me, a lot of figuring out what feels good for me and my communities, and then also what makes the most sense going forward in making business work and making money.
The CEO of Indigenous Experiences, Trina Mather-Samard, says the goal was to build up the skills of Indigenous makers and creators from across Ontario and help elevate or launch their businesses. She says it's been a huge success.
They've been really exploring all sorts of opportunities. They set up as vendors at our Pibone Winter Festival here and sold direct to the client, but we have some that are already working, on getting into stores. We have a couple lucky ones who have been chosen to be part of New York Fashion Week to elevate some outfits with their jewelry.
Mariah Migwans is one of the artists whose jewelry will be seen on a fashion runway in New York. She says the program has boosted her entrepreneurship skills in budgeting and marketing. She's even expanded her stock in the marketplace.
So right now I am in a couple stores. I am featured in a couple markets as well. I'm not really sure what I would like to do from here, but I know that I do want to keep growing. I would like to eventually take my art and push more towards just dancing and do a lot more workshops in that way.
According to Samard, the Indigenous Makers Masterclass project was a pilot program, but she's hoping to offer it again in the new year. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
In Los Angeles, residents are mourning the loss of an iconic mountain lion. The lion, known as P22 or as Tukarat to the Tongva, lived in Griffith Park near downtown LA. P22 lived in the park for 12 years, where he lived off of deer, coyote, and potentially a koala. He was put down by state park officials after being captured in a backyard. Tribes in California are now calling for the lion to receive a proper burial in Griffith Park with the belief that he must be returned to the earth. P22's remains are currently housed at the National History Museum of Los Angeles, which has promised not to display the remains. The museum is currently in talks with tribes to create a plan to bury the lion. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Happy New Year from all of us at ICT. One of our major accomplishments was live coverage of the election in partnership with FNX and KVCR in San Bernardino, California. Aliyah Chavez has this report about a record number of Native Americans appointed to top positions by President Joe Biden.
Biden has set the bar pretty high in terms of really being inclusive.
It first started with Secretary Deb Haaland in December 2020. Before Biden was officially sworn into office, he began building his cabinet. That was when he selected the Laguna Pueblo citizen to be his Interior Secretary. She made history, becoming the first Native American to ever serve as a cabinet secretary, and officially became sixth in line in succession to the presidency.
Deb has done a tremendous job, and I don't know when we'll see another cabinet member who's a Native person, so it's been a unique opportunity, and I think she's, gone about her business and really made a difference for Indian country.
In March of 2021 came the next big nomination. That's when President Biden appointed Janie Sims Hipp to be the General Counsel of the Department of Agriculture. She was confirmed to that position 4 months later. In December 2021, Chuck Sams became the Director of the National Park Service. That made him the first tribal citizen to ever lead the agency.
But I think we have more qualified people than we've ever had.
2022 has been a big year for appointments. In February, Navajo citizen Shelley Lowe became the chair for the National Endowment for the Humanities. She is the first Native person to lead that agency. In May 2022, Sunshine Sykes was confirmed as a judge in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. That made her the first Native federal judge in California and just the 7th Native federal judge ever appointed. A month later, in June 2022, Lynn Malerba was called to be the Treasurer of the United States. She is the first Native person to serve in that position. And if you happen to find a newly printed dollar bill, you'll likely see Treasurer Malerba's signature on it. September 2022 was the most recent high-ranking confirmation when Rosalind So became the Director of the Indian Health Service. Trudell says he has never seen a list with this many political appointments, and that dates back to the 1960s under the Nixon administration.
First of all, a lot of these people are political appointees, meaning that once the Biden administration ends, the incoming president at that time will begin to staff up again and everything.
Trudell says there are still areas of improvement, citing that Indian country needs more federal judges and more professionals in agencies like the Department of Justice. Aliyah Chavez, ICT News.
What's important to Indigenous voters? ICT's Pacey Garcia reports.
From Anchorage, Alaska to Rapid City, South Dakota, Native voters showed up at the polls on Tuesday. ICT's reporters and producers interviewed Native folks to see what they looked for in candidates and platforms.
Local and state, I think it's important to look into the women's rights and also marijuana.
Definitely fish and protecting our resources and using our resources to better our economy.
On a local level, it's more of how we can better our communities back at home. It's more how we can make something more better for a better platform for our next generation to come up, so that all the obstacles and hoops that we went through, they don't have to go through that.
Two of the most important issues to me are probably healthcare and education. I know that that's really important to my family and the work that we do in our day-to-day.
The people we spoke to expressed concerns about access to voting. It's an issue that seems to be common across Native communities.
I haven't been able to afford my own location, so now I had to resort to getting a post office to just be able to vote, which costs a lot of money. But right now, hopping from house to house, extended stay, and just it's a big old mess. So
many people just don't like the process of voting because it's such a long time, and many of them don't take it too seriously.
Especially me, for a long time, I didn't feel like our voice mattered. I didn't feel like our vote mattered.
Despite the challenges, these voters also said they saw an increase in wanting to combat voting restrictions.
This Black Hills Powell, they had booths there that would allow you to vote too. There's accessible ways to become a registered voter in your respective community. It's just based off of if you feel your voice matters.
Here in Washington State, after we register, we are sent mail-in ballots, and so that is something that we can do pretty easily.
In Phoenix, Arizona, Pacey Garcia, ICT News.
Many tribal elections were on November 8th, 2022, coinciding with state and national elections. ICT's Vincent Moniz reports.
For many Americans, November 8th is the day to use their voices to elect the people and policies they hope will support their communities. And for some tribal nations, that same day is also when they hold their own elections. The Mandan Hidatsa Arikara Nation in North Dakota currently has 17,000 citizens. But in their last election for chairman in 2016, only 2,400 people drove back to their territory to cast a ballot. MHA Nation citizen Prairie Rose Seminole is a voting advocate who has also worked on a number of projects to protect Native voting rights. Seminole thinks the reason why her nation votes on the day it does is more about being practical than anything else.
It has become somewhat complicated. The reality that people are still trying to disenfranchise our vote in non-tribal elections still exists. And for voting at one polling location for a tribal election and then driving to other polling locations for the non-tribal elections can be problematic. And so we want to ensure that our tribal voters have access to, what they need to make sure that they vote that day.
On the other side of things, the Navajo Nation's population soared to the biggest in the country with almost 400,000 citizens. In the 2020 election, Indigenous voters from the nation helped turn the state from red to blue in many races, including president. The Nez Citizen and Navajo County Democrats Executive Director Janie Parrish is working to increase voter registration in tribal communities. Parrish says her leadership understood the voting challenges of its citizens and switched to November 8th to help streamline the process.
There might be some nice conclusions made, but even also convenience, because Honestly, the scheduling works out because we get to have our Navajo Nation presidential election councils the same time that we get to have state and federal, which are all critically important offices. And so why not be able to vote for our tribal council delegate, our Navajo president, as well as the state elections and federal elections.
With many obstacles facing Native voters this election season, one thing is for certain. Many will be in line, ready to vote their conscience on November 8th. In Bismarck, North Dakota, Vincent Moniz, ICT News.
When we come back, the Republican native vote in Oklahoma. Stay with us. Across the country, more Native Americans are registered Democrat than Republican. However, it's not the case in Oklahoma. ICT's Dacoda McDowell Wahpekeche has more.
Democrats and Republicans, those two parties are top of mind for many during this year's midterm election. Data from ICT shows that majority of candidates running for public office in Oklahoma are Republican, and that's by a long shot. Dion Francis is a native conservative from eastern Oklahoma, and he says party affiliation doesn't matter to him when it comes to voting.
As a conservative Native American, we want to support our culture, and we want to preserve our culture. I'm for tribal sovereignty. I'm for improving the quality of life in Indian country for Native Americans.
Now, Francis says that most people in his area are conservative, and he said that he's a big supporter of Native American candidates.
Whether they're here or other places, but I feel like they come the closest to supporting the ideas and concepts that I have, whether they're Democratic or Republican.
Mike Bread, another Native Republican, said he feels frowned upon by other Natives for being a Native Republican, but says it varies upon how someone is raised.
I think it all depends on kind of how you're raised, you know what I mean, and how you're brought up, and the beliefs that you're told that are a way of being. And some of my family's this way, and other families this way, you know.
He said his kids made him care more about politics, which guided him toward being a Republican because of their stances on issues like abortion.
Here recently, you know, before I was probably 28, 27, 28, I really never even paid attention to, you know, I just kind of went about my own and didn't really pay any attention to, you know, the state of Oklahoma or the presidential election or any of that. And I just kind of did my own thing.
Now, Bread feels that everyone should concentrate on the youth to better the future.
Concentrate on our youth because that's our future, and there's nothing more than important than improving the previous generation, you know. So,
reporting in Oklahoma, Dacoda McDowell Wahpekeche, ICT News.
Since 2002, Tom Cole has represented Oklahoma in the U.S. House of Representatives. ICT's Mark Trahant has this profile.
You've mentored me on Native American issues. You've mentored me on the issues that I didn't even know affected other parts of the country. You started mentoring me when I first started getting into Indian Health Services. And I was blown away by how much you've done through it just by being an appropriator.
And it's not just Indian health. Tom Cole has influenced virtually every major piece of legislation involving Indian country over the past 20 years. He has reached out to Republicans and made the case for bipartisanship in a climate where that does not often happen.
People on this panel and people in this Congress know how seriously I think about what I would regard our constitutional oath when we swear allegiance to the Constitution. You swear allegiance to Indian sovereignty, whether you know it or not, because it's in there in Section 1, Article 8.
Advocates say the Violence Against Women Act would originally never have become law without Tom Cole's consistent and cross-partisan support. Then that's a usual place for him. He has a long record supporting tribal sovereignty. He has also been a mentor to other Native Americans serving in the Congress. Sharice Davids represents Kansas as a Democrat.
I am so pleased to be able to serve alongside you. Thank you for all you do for the Native American Caucus, of course, but for Indian country as a whole, all the work that you do and expertise that you bring. And The fight for tribal sovereignty that you always keep up does not go unnoticed.
Tonight, of course, we are charting the number of Democrats and Republicans who will win this election. But it's also worth noting that after the election, no matter which party controls Congress, Tom Cole will be a voice for Indigenous nations and people. He is expected to win his 11th term in office tonight. Mark Trahant, ICT News.
Representative Cole's colleague in the House, Markwayne Mullin, successfully ran for the Oklahoma Senate seat vacated by Jim Inhofe. ICT's Dacoda McDowell Wahpekeche profiled the first Native American in the Senate since Colorado's Ben Nightinghorse Campbell 18 years ago.
Markwayne Mullin is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation from eastern Oklahoma. He is running for a new seat to represent the state as one of its 2 senators in the U.S. Congress. Mullin is already a member of Congress, currently serving Oklahoma's District 2 in the United States House. He represents 26 of Oklahoma's 77 counties, most of which are inside Indian reservations. ICT reached out to Mullin's campaign for an interview, but were told his schedule was full. Mullin, who is endorsed by former President Donald Trump, told ICT in an interview from January 2021 that he has developed great relationships with not only Oklahoma tribes, but also tribes elsewhere.
And I've developed some really good friends, lifelong friends, in Navajo Nation. And in some case, I feel like they think I represent them, which I do. I mean, I never cast a vote just for a District 2 of Oklahoma. When we're casting a vote, it affects the entire nation, right? And I've heard a lot from individuals out in Arizona and actually New Mexico too. And every time, they're voicing their opinion, but they're also voicing their concerns.
Mullin was able to run for this office after longtime Senator Jim Inhofe decided to step away from the office he held for almost 20 years. During Mullin's time in office as representative, he has served on around 35 caucuses, including the Native American caucus, where he served as vice chair. Issues like the McGirt v. Oklahoma Supreme Court case that has shifted Oklahoma and tribal nations surrounding jurisdiction isn't being pushed away from Mullin. Instead, tribal government leaders like Muskogee Nation Principal Chief David Hill and Cherokee Nation Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. and others have said they are confident in Mullin working to protect tribal sovereignty and willing to resolve any issues that may come because of the ruling. Reporting in Oklahoma, Dacoda McDowell, Wahpekeche, ICT News.
Alaska is unique in many ways. When we come back, see how ranked choice voting played out this year. Stay with us. Open primaries and ranked choice voting were put to the test in a recent special election to complete the term of the late Representative Don Young. ICT's Jacqueline Estes has more on the process.
Let's start with the basics of how most candidates are elected. In most primary elections, political parties like Republicans, Democrats, or Independents pick the candidates. Parties act as gatekeepers for who gets to run in the general election. That gate is wide open in Alaska. Michelle Spark, who is Yupik, explains.
Everyone with a dream and $100 could apply and fill out the paperwork if they were eligible. They became a candidate.
In Alaska, candidates can only win with the majority of votes. That's due to ranked choice voting, a process in which voters rank candidates in order of preference. If none of them get a majority, the lowest vote getter is dropped. Their second choice votes go to the other candidates in an instant runoff. That continues until someone gets a majority. Sparks said with ranked choice voting, candidates need to run a different kind of campaign. They need to reach out to people outside their party.
I think the open primary system really opens a lot of doors, and it kind of moderates people's campaigns and positions. They have to appeal to a lot more than a fraction of their base in order to be a lawmaker of the caliber that you should be when you're representing the majority and not just the plurality. So we're pretty excited about the open primary system.
We saw this play out in August in Alaska's special election. Representative Mary Peltola is Yupik and a Democrat. She got the most votes in the first count, but didn't get a majority. Counting second-choice ballots brought her a majority of votes over Republicans Nick Begich and Sarah Palin. Political commentator Matt Buxton with the Midnight Sun podcast said the system worked as it should.
I think the system, almost the most important thing to me is that it really allowed the voters to, kind of find their candidate of choice.
Maine and several municipalities, including New York City, also use ranked choice voting. In Anchorage, Alaska, Jocelyn Estes, ICT News.
Mary Peltola secured her seat in the House of Representatives, and live coverage is full of surprises. Here's ICT Shirley Snavy with Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan.
So you heard it here first, ICT. We just won, and so it's very excited, very exciting. Very excited that we have won re-election, and just really looking forward to the good work that we can do for people across Minnesota. Thank you.
And we were talking earlier about she is a 9-year-old, and we think she's sleeping, but I bet she's up. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for a look back at the 2022 November election. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, Happy New Year. I'm Mackenzie Allen Charmley.
Sometimes you got to take a stand, just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
The Sand Creek Massacre, the betrayal that changed Cheyenne and Arapaho people forever, focuses on tribal accounts of Colorado's deadliest day. Exhibition details at historycoloradocenter.org.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.